Oh.
Welcome, everyone, to Ecopsychology Voices, the Canadian Ecopsychology Network's ongoing series of video interviews with ecopsychology's luminaries. I'm Linda Buzzell, co-host of the series with our Canadian Ecopsychology Network founder, Carol Koziol. And today I'm really excited to be in conversation with Molly Young-Brown, who is the co-author with Joanna Macy of this amazing book, Coming Back to Life. This is the second edition, but there are two of them. The first one from way back in 1998, where they predicted so much that we're actually going through right now, which is why I'm happy that we're going to be talking with her. So let me give you a little bit of information and background on Molly for those of you who aren't yet familiar with her work. Molly Young-Brown is co-author with Joanna Macy of both editions of the book that I mentioned, Coming Back to Life. In her work as a writer, workshop facilitator, and life coach in Mt Shasta, California, she draws on the Work That Reconnects, ecopsychology, psychosynthesis, and systems thinking, and specializes in working with activists. We need help right now. She edits an online journal, Deep Times, a journal of work that reconnects. So just to get us started, Molly, could you help us understand what the Great Unraveling is and what we're going through right now?
Yeah, big question.
One, right?
Yeah, in the original version of the book that you mentioned, we talked about the Great Unraveling as something that was going to happen and was starting to happen. But now we're clearly in the midst of it. And it's the unraveling of both the life support systems, kind of the environmental, ecological life support systems. Mm-hmm. But it's also the unraveling of our financial systems and of our societies, our democracy in the United States, racial tensions increasing. But what we've come to understand recently is, the Great Unraveling is happening now for us white privileged people, but it's been going on for 5 or 6 years. I don't know how many years, from the point of view of indigenous people and from the point of view of people in Africa and people that had been enslaved, and their lives and their way of life been unraveling, right, and being kept together by extraordinary means ever since. Mm-hmm. So it's really we have to expand our understanding of the Great Unraveling and say, it's reaching a crescendo now, and it's reaching into the lives of white privileged people, but it's been going on for a long, long time.
So I've been kind of rereading the parts of the book that help us with this, and it says that the Great Unraveling is definitely the story of the Industrial Growth Society, which is, I think, what you're talking about. It's that sort of modern, Western, often white way of living that's now led us into this great unraveling as it sort of comes apart at the seams. And you describe it as the ongoing derangement and collapse of biological, ecological, economic, and social systems. And then there's the hope that we're going to actually now come into the great turning into the life-sustaining society. But those of us who are caught in this sort of liminal place right now are starting to panic, which is why I'm so glad to be able to talk with you. And I found a quote that I would love to hear what your thoughts on it are. It's by Antonio Gramsci, and it says, the crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. And
Wow.
at least to those of us who are in this place, it kind of feels like that. We're waiting for this new life-sustaining way of life to be born, and we're excited about it. We're trying to figure out how to facilitate it, and yet it just feels like we're suspended. It's not happening yet. How do we live through this period? What do we need to do?
Yeah. And guess what? I don't have an answer.
I think none of us do.
Because, I mean, humankind has not, well, I don't know, maybe humankind has met these kinds of crises in the past, but certainly not within our memory. Maybe World War II was close to it, but, and for many people it was. But we can take Rebecca Solnit's work on how people respond to disasters is so appropriate, because that is what happens. People do step up and do respond and do find strength within themselves. And so in a way, a disaster is not desirable, but it can give rise to transformation. And that's kind of what we're looking at. As things fall apart, we really incredibly creative and inventive humans can find new ways to meet our biological needs and social needs. And we have to. We've got to. So some people say, gee, are we living, do we need hospice for a dying civilization? Or do we need to be, creators of the new? And it's sort of both. It's like both. We do have to mourn what we're losing. And if we don't, if we just try to soldier on, we're numbing ourselves and cutting ourselves off from the sources of joy and life within us, if we cut ourselves off from our grief as well. And lots of people are saying that. Joanna Macy's been saying it for 30 years or 40 years, but a lot of other people are now catching on. Yes, we need to start grieving what we're losing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you talked about the Great Turning. It's happening at the same time. It's absolutely simultaneous. It's not like, well, first we're going to unravel and then we're going to, no, yeah. It's happening simultaneously. So it, like we were talking earlier about looking outside at this beautiful weather and knowing that we're in drought, severe drought, and what that can mean in terms of fires and so forth. That's the kind of, the Great Unraveling and the Great Turning happening at the same time. Joy and fear and grief and determination and, all those things happening at the same time. And I wanted to say that in the book, we said that it had to do with the Industrial Growth Society, and it certainly has intensified. But what I'm now understanding is that what gave rise to the Industrial Growth Society a couple hundred years ago was the colonial society that existed prior to that. That the Industrial Growth Society is just an extension of colonialism. And instead of it being one group of people oppressing another, well, it's still one group of people oppressing another, but now it has to do with corporations and finances and wealthy, super wealthy people and people not so wealthy, and the structures have changed somewhat, but it's still the same kind of thinking.
Right.
separation, competitive, I'm better than you, that kind of thing.
I've been thinking a lot about the life cycle of cultures and how there has to be the death of the old, including old systems, in order for the birth of the new or the new to take over. Can you think of any ways that we could do a better job than we're doing of letting go of some of these old systems that are really pretty creaky?
Mm. Well, I just think in very practical, personal terms.
Mm-hmm.
Quit buying packaged foods as much as you can. Go to the farmer's market, buy local produce as much as you can. And if you're going to a Safeway or I don't know if Safeway is stopped existing, I don't know. But if you're going to a regular supermarket, you know, go to the organic aisle and buy that food. Yeah, it costs a little more, but you're also getting more nutrition. So it's really, you're getting more bang for your buck.
Right.
And harass the owners of the supermarket to buy local and buy organic as much as possible. So just in terms of how we're dependent, there's a wonderful book by Sherry Mitchell called Indigenous Instructions. I don't know if you've read it. Oh, so I'm sorry, Sacred Instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, she points out that our dependency on big ag, being able to go and buy all the food at the supermarket from 2,000 miles away, is a kind of colonialism.
Ah.
That we're like dependent on these big corporations for our food. So any ways that we can find to disengage from big ag, big pharma, big, whatevers, and take care of our essential needs locally. And obviously I can't grow all my own food. I'm just not capable of that. I grow a little bit, but it's really kind of just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But so it is community. You can't just do this all by yourself.
Right.
It is about building these structures into your community.
Which I think brings up the whole issue of resilience and how both individually and in community, we can be resilient to these losses and shocks and
Right.
Deal with our grief. As you say, we can't do this alone. It's probably one of the biggest mistakes that people made in terms of their psychological well-being as they're coping with everything, these cascading disasters and traumas that we're all living with now. Do you have any thoughts on building resilience in addition to definitely going local, growing your own food? I'm a permaculture food forester, so I love that suggestion.
Yeah. And not everybody can do it. I mean, if you're living in a city,
Right.
in an apartment building, you may not be able to grow your own food, but community gardens are done. There are ways that, for me, one of the most inspiring stories that I have heard in the last several years is what happened in Cuba when they were cut off from the West by blockades and I can't think of the word, because they were communists and therefore, and they had this amazing revolution where they used every square inch of land in the cities everywhere to grow food and fed themselves collectively. So I think of, gardens on rooftops in cities, things like that, and actually that would help with the air conditioning and everything else too. If you had a garden on your roof, you wouldn't have as much heat coming in and it would be insulating. So, but that's kind of not addressing your question. Resilience. Well, actually, this is not addressing your question either, but it's just a thought that came to me while you were speaking,
Go for it.
which is the individual versus community.
Yes.
That we all have to go it alone and take care of our own families, and you know, this and it's very ingrained. It's very ingrained. It's like it's your responsibility to save for the future, so that nobody else has to help you out. I mean, and so then you feel guilty if you don't do that. Oh, I've got to save money. I can't give it away. I can't support my political candidate because I got to hold on to my money. So it breeds a real unfortunate result. And I'm totally victim of that as much as anyone. But what I see happening is that advertising and political people, it's like, well, you know, you have a corporation saying, well, people want this. We had in our community, we are been fighting for 5 years a water bottling plant, and we've kept it from opening, so we've been successful, but it's still trying to open though. And one of their things that they said on their environmental impact review was that there was a market demand for bottled water. And that's why they had to build this plant, because there's a market demand. The market demand has been manufactured.
Right.
It's been, you know, people have been persuaded that they need to have bottled water. And it didn't happen like there was this swelling of people saying, hey, we need bottled water. It was implanted. And so the whole idea that individual consumers need or want stuff is very suspect. I think we have to really say, wait a minute, that's not really true. And if it is true, it's been manipulated. So, but back to resilience. I don't know, ask me another question about resilience.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about the work that reconnects, and maybe that really comes together there, is how can people around the planet, whatever their situation is with the Great Unraveling or the Great Turning, how can the work that reconnects help them get together, build community, and do what needs to be done wherever they are?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. I like it. Partly because I've been involved in the work that reconnects since the 1990, basically. So what, 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
And I see it becoming more and more and more important.
Yes.
It's like, before it was kind of theoretical. It wasn't theoretical. I mean, people got a lot out of the workshops. But now it's like, oh my God, it's like, you know, it tasted good before and now you're starving.
Yeah.
And so it's food for the soul. And the reason it is because it really is designed to draw out of people what they are feeling, what they're thinking, their own wisdom, their own resources, rather than saying, here's our plan, here's what you need to do, you know, follow these steps and you'll be fine. It helps people discover that within themselves. And the way it does that is through a series of what we call practices, or could be called exercises. I like practices better because it, you know, it's like a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
In which people are invited to explore and share with one another their feelings about things, and both their gratitude, their joy, what brings them joy, what they love about life, that kind of thing, but also what troubles them, what they're frightened about, what they're angry about, what they're grieving. and sharing it in community.
Yeah.
So it's not something you do by yourself in your room.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you come together and share with other people and discover, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one that feels this way.
Right.
And you actually get information too, because somebody will come in and start talking about what's happening at the border. And we have someone here from Chula Vista, so I'm sure she's got direct experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the what's happening at the border of the United States, southern border, and maybe somebody else didn't even know about it. So then they find out, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
that's going on too. Well, obviously, there's way too much for any one individual to address. Way too much. You could go crazy trying to write letters to your congressman about everything that needs to be addressed. So again, the Work That Reconnects helps people connect with what's my calling, what's my role, what are the resources, the circumstances that I'm in that, okay, I can address this water bottling plant in my community because it's here and I'm here and it's something I can be involved in. I can't really do too much about what's happening at the southern border because I'm hundreds of miles away. I can support friends though who are working down there, and I can send money to organizations. So you find out what's my calling, and you know that it's not up to you. It's not up to me to save the world. It's not up to you, Linda. Single-handed, get out there, save the world.
Yeah.
We cannot. We have to come together and do it's like my assignment and you do yours assignment. And we support each other in that. And, cheer each other on. So the Work That Reconnects helps in those ways. Shall I talk about the spiral?
Oh, yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Because what we do in a workshop is we go through what we call a spiral, and they're called a spiral because it doesn't ever stop. It's not like, okay, I've come full circle, I'm done. But the first part of the spiral is gratitude. And what we've found is by starting with gratitude, you really get people into their hearts. And it's also easy. It's not threatening. People are really almost always willing to talk about or share what they love about life or whatever. So we have some practices that help bring that forward. And the interesting thing is that as you get in touch with your gratitude, you also get in touch with your grief.
Yeah.
Because you're in touch with what you're losing or what you have lost that you love. So we move then into what we call honoring our pain for the world. It's a long title, but it's really important. Honoring our pain for the world. And when this work first started coming out, it was revolutionary. Pain for the world? Oh no, I have personal pain, and maybe I care about, I have pain for my child who's going through a rough time, or my husband, or my father, or whatever, but pain for the world?
Mm-hmm.
But guess what? If we are in fact, which we are in fact, interconnected with everything, when there is pain in the world, when there's suffering in the world, whether it's a person or an animal or even a tree, we're getting that on some level. We may know about it, literally because we read the news or whatever, but we also pick it up energetically.
Mm-hmm.
So if we shut that away and try to ignore it or pathologize it, as psychologists did for a long time, or some psychologists, then we don't allow that juice to be part of our. So we go into honoring our pain, and again, it's in community. So I'm weeping for the trees that have been cut in my neighborhood, but there's other people there who are with me and holding me in that grief. And it's really, really important. So then we move from there, again, quite naturally into seeing with new eyes. Because as we let ourselves express our grief and our anger and our fear and whatever else, we start feeling that we are interconnected. We start really experiencing that. It's not just a concept. We actually feel it because we are. And so the whole section on seeing with new eyes is how the world looks when we let ourselves feel our gratitude and our grief, and what we discover about ourselves, what we discover about the world, what we discover about what Joanna calls deep time, our connection to our ancestors and our connection to future beings, for whom what we do now is going to determine what happens in the future. So that connection there of responsibility, and also inspiration. Anyone who has grandchildren or who knows, maybe they're not your biological grandchildren, but you have young children that you connect with and know about, you know how inspiring they are and how much you want them to have a decent world to live in. So that is the seeing with new eyes part. And then we move from there into going forth. What are we going to do? How am I called in my particular circumstances to respond right now? And maybe different in 2 years or whatever, but right now, how am I called to respond? And hearing from other people how they're called to respond. Now, sometimes people say, hey, let's get together and do this thing together, and that's great. But it's not necessary. But often people, after a workshop, they want to stay connected. And maybe they do through a Google group or something, so that they can share what's happening as they go forth with whatever their calling is calling them to do. There you go.
Oh, wow. I'm so struck by the psychological brilliance of this. It's so wise, and it really deals with human psychology in a super smart way that so many other endeavors or causes or whatever don't seem to have figured out some of these really smart, effective ways of connecting with people and helping people cope. Because right now, especially as the eco crisis gets worse and all these other crises, there's a lot of talk now in the press about eco anxiety and eco trauma. It's like we need to really find ways, as you're talking about, of dealing with this together in a smart way psychologically and with community support for people.
Right.
Because
right.
I mean, you and I have moved from the 90s to the aughts to, the teens, watching this go from, as you said, the pre-crisis. It's going to be coming. In fact, that's when I think the word eco-anxiety was sort of invented, this idea that something bad is going to happen. And then, there's even this phrase, pre-traumatic stress disorder, that a psychiatrist came up with, Lisa Van Susteren, about how people were getting triggered by news of future disasters and how that's changed as we're in the middle of it. And could you say more about how we deal with that psychology, with the grief, with the trauma of, for instance, in my community, with our fires and our mudslides that killed 23 people in our community, we're still kind of flailing around. How can the work that reconnects or any part of this begin to help us?
Well, one of the things that we're challenged by is that the work that reconnects has been offered as workshops. And that means people have to know enough to sign up for the workshop. And they often have to have the financial capacity to pay for the workshop. So we're really exploring how can the Work That Reconnects be more integrated into the community. And one way is through just, regular, whatever. One of the things I'm going to be doing tomorrow actually is giving a presentation, a little mini class, a little 1 hour or 1.5 hour mini class in the Work That Reconnects for a class at UC Santa Cruz.
Great.
So there are ways that people are getting at least a little bit of it. And some of the practices are standalone. That is, you could just do one practice with your church group or in a class or in a meeting. What about an activist meeting? You're getting together to protest something, and you take the time to do a simple practice from the Work That Reconnects, so that people are allowing their feelings. Because often when we're in an activist mode, we're just out there doing it, and we don't take time to take care of our emotional field. That's why burnout happens.
Yes.
Is because of there's not enough time to, and we can actually be more effective as activists if we take care of the emotional field. But it has to be done, well, it doesn't have to be done, but it's best if it's done in a group, in a community.
Oh,
I don't know if that answers the question.
it does. This is great. And I'm looking forward to opening up now so we can have some questions from all the people that are attending here with us. But I just want to thank you so much for the work itself and also for sharing this time with us.
I feel incredibly fortunate to have discovered it in 1990, really, and having attached myself to Joanna Macy deliberately. This lady is my mentor. I am going to find out how I can get next to her. And then as a result, the work has become my work as well.
Yeah.
So
A great decision. Okay, well, I will turn this over to Carol.
Well, thank you, Linda and Molly, for a really interesting conversation. And I'd like to invite our audience, if there's any questions, if they'd like to enter it in the chat or unmute. Oh, we do have some things coming up already. So Karen Scott, did you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question?
Thanks. Molly, an amazing opportunity has come my way. I facilitate the Work That Reconnects and have done for a while. And I'm going to run some workshops for Welsh Government, for civil servants in Welsh.
wow.
A bit daunting and quite exciting. And they're not paying me, by the way. I'm doing this as a gift. The person I'm linking with doesn't have budget. Anyway, I wondered, do you know of anyone else who's taken the Work That Reconnects into those kinds of settings, and whether you've got any ideas, tips about which kinds of practices might work well in that kind of environment, really?
Right. I probably do, but I can't think of who right off the top of my head. But what does come to mind is in Colombia, they are going through a truth and reconciliation process in Colombia after all the wars and the drug wars and, everything. They're trying to heal as a nation. And guess what? The Work That Reconnects is being invited to be part of that process. There are people there, actually, Helena Del Terre. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce her name. She's actually from Belgium, but she's been doing a whole lot of work, she and her colleagues, in Colombia, and they have been asked to bring the Work That Reconnects into the truth and reconciliation process. So that's one area where it is being used on a governmental level in a little different way. As for practices, you can't go wrong with open sentences. And I'm going to say what open sentences are for the benefit of other people here. In open sentence, you don't ask a question, you have an open sentence. So you might say something like, what I love most about life is, and then people in pairs respond to that, and they finish the sentence, and then they talk some more, whatever they want to say. And you can design them to be very specific to a situation. So, for example, you might say, what I love most about working for the government is. And then you could say, that would be the gratitude part. And then you could say, you could move into honoring our pain and say, what I find most challenging about working for the government or working in my job or whatever. Or it could be even broader than that. It could be what I think is working right now really well in the government and what is not working well. And if you do answer that second one, you may want to have a third one that talks to feelings. So first, what's not working, and then, and how I feel about it. You know, what are the, again, I'm starting to ask a question. You got to put it in an open sentence. And the reason for that is, if you ask a question, it puts people back in school and they think there's a right answer. An open sentence does not imply that there's any right answer. So it really is more inviting to people to bring out what's inside. But I keep slipping into asking a question as I'm talking to you. So does that help?
It does, thank you. I was also thinking about the Parsifal story and the blocked response, which I think is in active hope. Because I kind of wanted to get them to think about how, you know, emotion in workplaces thing. It that. But thank you, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Oh, please do. And I edit a journal called Deep Times Journal, and everybody, it's about to come out with a new issue by next Monday it will be out. So you can go on the workthatreconnects.org and find it there. But I would love for you to write an article for Deep Times Journal about your work. Would you do that?
Thank you. I have got one that I gather is going to be in this issue, but the editor that I was working with.
Karen, I knew your name was familiar.
Yes.
So what's the article?
Oh, it's really about living with uncertainty and the fool in the tarot.
Okay, I'll have to go look. I'm not associating it right now, but I'll go look at.
And yes, I'd be very happy to come back and write an article about
Great.
this.
About your work with the Welsh government. That'd be terrific. Wonderful. Thank you.
Super. Pat Kerr, hello Pat, asks about the Rebecca Solnit reference that you made. What specific book was that?
I couldn't remember. That's why I didn't say. Linda, do you remember the name of that book?
I can't. No. But I think if you just Google her or look her up on Wikipedia, her publications should be there.
It's called A Paradise Built in Hell.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Super. Any other questions? Nothing's coming up. Was there anything from the list that I forwarded, Linda?
Let me take a look here. The one question was, what personal traits and competencies beyond resilience do you think it is important to cultivate during this time?
Well, I'll answer that from my psychosynthesis background. And I don't know if any of you know about psychosynthesis, but it's a transpersonal psychology that I studied for many, many years. And I feel is totally integrated with the Work That Reconnects. Mm-hmm. And in that school, if you call it, we call something disidentification. It's a huge long word, and we never could find a better one because it's loosening up our identifications. We tend to identify with, I have to be a certain way, I have to have a certain job, I have to dress a certain way, I have to, and we identify ourselves with external circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And when those circumstances change, we're really at a loss. So practicing disidentification, learning how to say, yes, this is part of who I am, and there's more to me than this. So it's not disassociation,
Mm-hmm.
it's disidentification. And it's such a powerful tool. And I really see it, like I look at politicians and how could you be acting that way? Don't you know about disidentification? It's like, it's such a powerful tool because it frees you from being caught in a particular circumstance or a particular, and it's hard. And there's some ways that I can't disidentify. I can't disidentify from being involved in the Work That Reconnects. I can't disidentify from being a mother or a grandmother in my case. That's such an important part of who I am. But I can entertain the possibility that, yes, that is a very important part of who I am, but it's not all of me.
Right.
And I would still exist and be able to function in the world if I didn't have grandchildren. So it's that sense of freedom, really.
So it's like letting go of some social roles that could be holding us back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any way that we attach to being, like, and I'm getting older. I don't know about, it seems like everybody gets older, but I'm 77. And so I'm aware of the fact that I may not have my health. I thank God I have it right now. And that's what happens. Instead of being afraid of losing,
Mm-hmm.
I just am grateful for what I have right now. And I know I may not have it in the future, but I don't have to have it to know that I'll still be able to respond and function in a positive way. Even if I was laid up in bed and couldn't, whatever.
Yeah.
I'd still be there.
I love that.
Yeah.
So there's
do
a
we
question.
have any additional? Go ahead, Carol.
Okay, sorry, I was just, can I go on? Because there's a couple more questions.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So Eleanor asks, first time Work That Reconnects facilitating her first workshop next week. And Molly, do you have any specific advice for a first time facilitator?
Wow. Well, congratulations and go for it. You go, girl. I'm just delighted to hear that. I think two things. One is, and this is good facilitation for anything, go in with a plan and then be prepared to let go of it. That's more disidentification in a way. Or non-attachment maybe is another way, because be willing to change your plan as the people respond to it and you discover. But don't be too wishy-washy in the sense that, well, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this because it's going to upset people or something like that. If you've made a plan, follow it. But if it becomes clear that the group needs something else, be willing to let it go. It's a fine balance. So, and open your heart. That's my other piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
Open your heart and let the hearts of the people that you're working with guide you, because they will.
Great, great advice. I have a question from Rowan. I have a strong sense of my going forth, but it's difficult working alone. Any tips on finding others who might help?
Where are you, Rowan? I can't remember. You told me before, but I don't remember. Where are you, Rowan?
Feel free to unmute yourself, Rowan, if you want.
Hi, I'm currently in Cambridge, England, but I normally live in Australia.
Well, there's lots of folks in Australia. I know Australia's a big country too, but I would suggest going on the Work That Reconnects website. And not only are people listed there who are facilitators, but there are also people who are just interested in the work. And I'll bet you may be able to find someone close to you. Or even if they're not close enough to meet in person, use Zoom and talk and support one another. But there are a lot of people in Australia, so I think you don't have to work alone. They're there, find them. And maybe, I don't know, is there an eco-psychology group in Australia? Maybe, you know, you could find buddies that way. But use the internet if you can't meet in person.
I think there's a big Facebook group too on just the big broad Work That Reconnects.
Yes, there is a Facebook group. Yep. So if you're into Facebook, you can use that as well.
Right.
Hi, this is Isabel Santis. I belong to a number of different Work That Reconnects groups that meet internationally. And if someone wants to put in their contact info, I can send you some additional information on them.
Okay, so if you are interested in that, put your, I guess, give it to chat.
Yeah.
Put your contact information in chat.
There's work on decolonization that is being done right now to make the Work That Reconnects less white. And there's also additional facilitator training being done by Lydia Hartunen. And there's all kinds of great stuff. So put in your info, I'm happy to share.
And you can also go on the Work That Reconnects website and get a lot of that information from there. Because that's, both of those things are listed on that website.
Super. A question from Gabrielle. Hello, Gabrielle. I'm wondering if there's a way to address, integrate, or acknowledge those personality types we would call introverted. Is there space for playing to those strengths?
Interestingly enough, I feel like the Work That Reconnects does appeal to introverts as well. I'm kind of in the middle on the Myers-Briggs, and so I have an introverted side to myself. And one of the ways that that works out is that a lot of the practices are done in pairs or very small groups, maybe a group of 3. So there's a certain amount of safety. And also the other part is they're often done in a very structured way. So I have 5 minutes to respond to an open question, open sentence, for example. And the other person just listens. They don't say anything. And then it's their turn. So that helps the extroverts shut up and let the introverts have some space. And in a situation that feels safe, that doesn't feel, the introvert may not want to speak out in the whole group, but the practices do make space for that. And I love that you said playing to those strengths. Yes, I am married to an extreme introvert, and I so appreciate the strengths that he has as that, being on that end of the spectrum.
Thank you.
If one more question from before we close up here is from Real. I'm interested in Molly's comment about personal health and aging. Is it safe to say that the process of self-acceptance of us as mortal natural beings includes grief of what we are losing, in addition to the gratitude for what we have?
Absolutely.
And the reason I ask is that my current focus has to do with loving nature more deeply by starting with loving ourselves as nature.
Thank you, Real. That's, I mean, you've already answered the question. Everybody, pay attention to what he just said. It's, yeah, mortal, natural human beings. We grieve what we lose, and we are grateful for what we have. And one of the things that is the nature we have left, love it, enjoy it, go out in it as much as you can. And when you're out in nature, don't be doing something else. Don't be, well, I don't know, playing disc golf might be fun. I'm not saying don't do that, but I guess take some time in which all you're doing is just absorbing the vibes, if you will, of your surrounding, and that you're looking around and seeing what's there, and even having kind of an internal dialogue with the trees or the animals, so that you're really being there and not just using it as a playground. And it's fine to use it as a playground too. I didn't mean to put that aspect down.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the bottom of our hour. This has been a really fascinating conversation. Linda, did you have any final words?
I just wanted to thank Molly again. I just think this is so important for all of us to learn about, experience, and be helped by as we're moving forward. Times are not getting easier, they're getting more challenging, and we need this more than ever. So thank you, Molly.
Well, I'm just delighted that this organization exists and are doing all that you're doing to bring enlightenment, if you will, to as many people as possible. And I'm just so delighted to have met you all, the ones that I got to speak to personally, and even the ones I just saw on the screen. I'm going to go back to gallery view so I can see as many people as possible.
And while you're gazing in everyone's eyes, Molly, do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
All you need is love. Da, 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 da. All you need is love. Well, that's not quite all you need. You also need food and, etc. But love is just so more and more important than ever in these times.
Wonderful. Deep, virtual love and hugs to you, Molly and Linda, and to everyone that joined us online today.
Carol, can I show something?
Sure.
If you all put your hands up, if you're in gallery view, and put your hands up there, it's like you're holding hands with the person next to you. So we can all hold hands.
Super. Isn't that wonderful? I feel so connected virtually. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.